Thanks for staying with us. You're watching WION World as one, and this is Speed News. Let's start with all the top stories making headlines today. Israel continues to pound Lebanon in heaviest strikes despite a ceasefire struck hours ago, killing hundreds of people, including civilians. Beirut saw fresh explosions as Israel declared Lebanon's exclusion in ceasefire with Iran, even as Iran-backed Hezbollah paused attacks on northern Israel and Israeli troops. Tel Aviv says over 100 Hezbollah command centers have been targeted in strikes, killing nearly 254, which is according to Lebanon's civil defense authorities. Meanwhile, Tehran has vowed hostilities following the latest attacks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel still had more goals to achieve, warning it was ready to renew fighting at any moment. He also said that enriched uranium will be removed from Iran either by agreement or by force. Earlier, Netanyahu's office released a statement saying Israel supports US President Donald Trump's decision to suspend strikes against Iran for 2 weeks, but said the ceasefire does not include Lebanon. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said Australia firmly believes that Lebanon should be included in the temporary ceasefire deal. The US and Iran agreed to pause their sprawling conflict for 2 weeks, but Israel and the United States both said that the 2-week ceasefire did not cover Lebanon, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the strikes would continue. According to Lebanon's Civil Defense Service, 254 people had been killed in Israeli strikes across Lebanon. The highest toll was in the capital Beirut, where Israeli strikes killed 91 people. US President Donald Trump has come down heavily on NATO after a meeting with its Secretary General Mark Rutte. In a social media post, Trump criticized the alliance for what he sees as a lack of support during the war in West Asia. He said, and I'm quoting him here, "NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again." He also took an aim to Greenland, calling the Danish territory big, poorly run piece of ice. Dozens of protesters gathered outside the White House to call for a real ceasefire between the United States, Israel and Iran. Waving Iranian, Palestinian and Lebanese flags, protesters echoed demands from around the world to stop the military campaign that started nearly 6 weeks ago. The US and Iran agreed to pause their sprawling conflict for 2 weeks. But Israel reportedly killed more than 250 people in its heaviest strikes on Lebanon since fighting with Hezbollah broke out last month. Israel and the US have said Lebanon was not part of the ceasefire with Iran, although Pakistan, a key intermediary in the ceasefire talks, said the truce would include Beirut.
Alright, so we're going to combine them. US out of Lebanon, US out of
occupation. We're dealing with federal agents jumping out.
Overseas, it also uses immigration forces to repress.
US President Donald Trump has raised a new proposal involving Iran and one of the world's most crucial oil routes. He says Washington is considering a possible joint venture with Tehran to manage and collect tolls in the Strait of Hormuz. In an interview with ABC News, journalist Jonathan Karl asked Trump whether he supported Iran's plan to charge ships passing through the strait. Well, the idea has been also backed by Trump's earlier Truth Social post, in which he stated there was big money to be made if the US helped manage increased traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. He also suggested that America could impose its own tolls on vessels transiting the channel. Crowds gathered in Tehran for the funeral of Majid Kademi, the head of the intelligence organization of Iran's elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who was killed earlier this week in what Iranian media described, citing a statement from the guards, as a terrorist attack. Kademi, who becomes the latest key figure killed in US-Israeli airstrikes, took over in 2025 after Israeli airstrikes killed his predecessor. He spent decades in intelligence and counter-espionage roles while rising through Iran's security apparatus. Before his appointment, Kademi headed the Guard's Intelligence Protection Organization, charged with internal surveillance and counterintelligence, and held senior roles in Iran's defense ministry. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Jeddah for a visit to the Gulf, where he will engage in talks with regional leaders to push for the permanent reopening of the Strait of Hormuz following a US-Iran ceasefire. His visit had been scheduled prior to the announcement of the ceasefire. Starmer, who has faced criticism from US President Donald Trump over his stance on US and Israeli strikes on Iran, has conveyed multinational discussions aimed at securing Allied support for reopening the critical waterway, a key passage for 20% of global oil and gas trade. Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez said her government will make a responsible increase to workers' income on May 1st, as her administration looks to leverage oil and mining developments to improve workers' salaries. She did not specify a figure for the wage rise yet. Venezuela's base minimum wage, which has been at 130 bolivars per month since March 2022, equivalent to just a few cents, though many public employees earn more through bonuses and other payments that can take their monthly incomes up to some $150. Well, Rodriguez noted that the pay rise would take into account impacts on inflation and that Venezuela would continue moving forward along that path as the country benefits from more resources. Rising oil-linked costs driven by tensions in West Asia have sent plastic prices sharply higher in southern China, squeezing margins, disrupting logistics and fueling panic buying across the supply chain in the country's largest plastics trading hub. Manager says factories' safety stocks had been depleted and new raw materials were now being bought at elevated market prices, pressure that would soon be passed on to downstream customers. The rush to secure supplies has also clogged warehouses and roads. North Korea conducted tests of various military technologies, including the cluster bomb warhead of a tactical ballistic missile and an electromagnetic weapon system. Its state media reports the country's Academy of Defense Science and the Missile Administration has conducted tests of an electromagnetic weapon system, carbon fiber bombs, a mobile short-range anti-aircraft missile system, and a tactical ballistic missiles cluster bomb warhead. Meanwhile, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said Pyongyang had test-fired multiple missiles. Its presidential Blue House convened an emergency security meeting urging Pyongyang to end such tests. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney told astronauts of NASA's Artemis II mission that Canadians are very proud of them. In a light-hearted call from Canada to space, Carney spoke with the astronauts about their experiences and lessons from the mission. Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen showed a Canadian flag with Carney's title on the back to the cameras and promised to present it to the Prime Minister upon their return. Voting has begun in Assam, Kerala and Puducherry in high-stakes electoral battles. Voting is now being held for 120 seats in Assam, 140 in Kerala and 30 in Puducherry in the phase of elections. Over 2.6 crore electors in Kerala will decide the fate of 883 candidates across 140 constituencies. Meanwhile, the BJP-led NDA is also looking to expand its footprint in the southern state. In Assam, more than 2.5 crore electors are eligible to exercise their franchise for 120-member Legislative Assembly. In Puducherry, around 10 lakh electors are eligible to cast their votes to elect a 30-member Legislative Assembly. Tamil Nadu will go to the polls on the 23rd of April, while West Bengal will hold elections in two phases of the 23rd and 29th of April. A court in Nepal has issued arrest warrants against former Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba and his wife Arzu Rana Deuba, former Foreign Minister of Nepal. Authorities have launched a money laundering probe against them, with plans to seek an interpolar notice as the couple remain abroad. The warrants were issued by the Kathmandu District Court. Officials say the move places the couple on a fugitive list as authorities prepare to seek an Interpol Red Notice. Investigators believe the Deuba couple are currently in Singapore for medical treatment. In a social media post, Deuba denied all allegations and expressed faith in the judicial process. Members of indigenous communities gathered in Brasilia as Brazil's Federal Supreme Court resumed a trial on the constitutionality of a law that reduced the area of Chamosim National Park in Para State to make way for the planned railway. Members of the indigenous movement were seen at the Free Land Camp and later in front of the court, where they followed the proceedings and displayed banners opposing the project. Among those present were one of the world's most recognized indigenous leaders who called for dialogue with authorities as well as support to protect indigenous lands. The roughly 1,000-kilometer project is designed to transport grain between two states. Police clashed with protesters who marched to the Argentina's Congress in Buenos Aires to demand the preservation of current glacier protections as lawmakers began debating a new law. In February, the Senate approved a reform to the law protecting the Andean glaciers, a measure promoted by President Javier Milei's government to unlock investment by mining companies. The bill has drawn opposition from environmental groups, which argue that changes to the original 2010 glacier law will weaken protections for water resources in favor of economic interests. If enacted, the controversial bill would enable provinces to set their own standards for protecting glaciers that serve as key freshwater reserves. Tourists flocked to 60 kilometers east of Brussels as millions of white blossoms colored the orchids of Belgium's pear heartland. The region harvests 350 million kilograms of pears annually, making it Europe's biggest producer of the famous conference pear. A pop-up blossom bar on a hilltop served visitors to witness the seasonal display. Asian markets turned cautious on Thursday, trimming recent strong gains as rising oil prices weighed on sentiment. Japan's Nikkei hovered near flat after a sharp surge, while South Korea slipped slightly. Broader Asia-Pacific shares also edged lower. Investors grew wary as Gulf tensions pushed crude prices high, fueling concerns about prolonged inflation and potential pressure on regional economic growth. Staying with oil now, oil prices rose as uncertainty over a fragile US-Iran ceasefire and restricted flows through the Strait of Hormuz kept investors on edge. Brent and US crude both climbed above $97 a barrel after a sharp drop in the previous session. For Asian markets, the rebound in oil added to caution, with investors concerned that limited supply from West Asia could sustain inflation and pressure regional economies. Doubts persist over the ceasefire's durability, with continued strikes in the region and shipping disruptions delaying a full resumption of oil flows, keeping energy markets volatile and sentiment in Asia subdued. US dollar steadied in early trade after recent losses as investors assess the stability of a fragile US-Iran ceasefire. The dollar index edged slightly higher, while the yen and other major currencies gave back some gains. A stronger dollar, supported by elevated oil prices, added pressure on regional currencies. Investors are also focused on upcoming US economic data and remarks from the Kazuo Ueda, which could influence currency moves across Asia. Social media platform X is rolling out 2 new features, which includes automatic post translation and a new image editor powered by AI. The automatic translation feature will allow users to view posts in multiple languages, with options to disable translation for specific content. The company has also introduced a new iOS image editor with tools such as drawing, text insertion, and a blur feature to hide sensitive details like faces and personal information. The update also integrates XAI's Grok models, allowing users to edit images using natural language prompts, such as transforming photos into artistic styles. Anthropic has hired Eric Boyd, a 16-year Microsoft veteran, as its new head of infrastructure to strengthen its AI systems. The appointment comes as demand for the company's AI tools continues to surge, driven by popular products like Cloud Code. But the company has recently faced service strains due to unprecedented demand from both individual and enterprise users to address capacity issues. Anthropic is expanding its cloud infrastructure and has committed to spend $50 billion on new AI data centers across the United States. According to Los Angeles Times report, cybercriminals have allegedly stolen a large amount of sensitive internal documents from the Los Angeles Police Department and leaked them online. The data is reported to include police personnel files, internal affairs investigations, and discovery documents with sensitive personal information such as witness details and medical records. The report says that the extortion group World Leaks is behind the breach. The Los Angeles Police Department has said it is investigating the incident, which appears to have affected a digital storage system linked to the LA City Attorney's office.